Welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about Vitoria 3 and how we are planning before release to be doing our first run, which is Tunis, kind of role-playing as reforming Carthage. To do this, we're going to have a few parameters and ways to think about. I've been brainstorming this a little bit. I'm very excited for the game. I can't wait, and so I've been trying to play in my head before the game drops. And okay, so the first thing is Carthage was a trade empire that was around kind of like maybe 600 BC to 300 BC, around those dates. It was destroyed by Rome. It was the last great enemy of Rome before Rome rose to prominence. And what they had was a lot of trade. They had a republic, and they had a, how should I say, they had a very interesting hodgepodge of a big multiculturalism, which was kind of rare back then, and they relied heavily on mercenaries in order to get things done. And so their armies were from all over the place. It wasn't like an all Roman army like the way the Romans were at that time. And so for this sort of role play type thing, in terms of trying to play like Carthage, we have a few things to keep in mind for our run that we're going to do, and that is we're going to try and be trade focused. I think that the only way to kind of play and try and get strong in this is going to be to try and lean really heavily into colonialism and focus a lot less on conquering other states unless there's opportunistic times to do so. If we are going to conquer other states, the number one is probably taking Sardinia. The idea being that that was important colony of Carthage, and it's pretty heavily, it's got a lot of ore. I assume it has a lot of ore in game. I don't have access to the game, so I can't double check these things. And then also Sicily, and these were kind of the two islands that were taken by the Romans in the First Punic War, and so we want to get them back. Other than that, conquering North Africa at whole is kind of a good look. Conquering Rome, which Carthage never got to do, would be interesting. And also southern Iberia was a colony of Carthage, and so that's kind of their territory. But as far as trade and colonization goes, taking the Sinai region in order to build the Suez Canal also seems good. So if we're conquering, that's where we're conquering. Another directive is we want to build Carthage really tall. I don't know if you can rename cities, but if you can, we want to rename the capital of Tunis Carthage, and we want to build it tall. So, for example, we're going to be encouraging migration from the start, which actually might be quite strong. I don't know how game balance is on release, and so it'll be hard to say. But Tunisia starts out as a, if we actually even pause the video, let's see. Tunisia starts out as a country that is a subject of the Ottomans, and right now I'm playing in the background the Egypt run that Paradox did on their page. And so Tunisia starts out as a subject of the Ottomans, which presents a lot of sort of interesting things going on in regards to game mechanics because we are part of their market, which means that we all have the same supply of goods, which provides us with some unique opportunities, and we also, it is easier to migrate inside of the market than it is inter-market migration. So, as far as building Carthage tall, we are going to institute pro-migration sorts of both just highly tolerant, religious type stuff if we can, multiculturalism, and also encourage migration. There's I forget what it's called. There's an edict, I think. Maybe it's called edict, where it encourages migration. I don't think this is a min-maxy edict, but it plays nicely for the playing Carthage tall type of strategy, where we're trying to have all the trade routes lead back to Carthage. And so talked about multiculturalism, and then also we want to eventually be our own customs union / get out of the Ottoman Empire. So let's talk a little bit about the start now that we've kind of got the base objectives. One thing to note is that both Mercantilism and Oligopoly are kind of good role-playing laws, but the problem with those, I think, is that they are both landowners like both of them, and I think we want to try and get away from the landowners and look towards a more modern Carthage. If my reading of like various things is correct, those are both supported by landowners, and we want to disempower the landowners at the start, which means there's a lot of industries, a lot of the baseline production. It looks like, based on watching a lot of these videos, I'll continue to play it. A lot of the baseline production seems to be owned by landowners. And so, one thing that's nice about being in the Ottomans market is, generally speaking, it seems that it is good to focus on, at the very beginning, increasing your pop's quality of life and making lumber, fabric, and what's the last one? Lumber, fabric, and food all cheaper in order to kind of kickstart your country. But all of those industries, it seems, are owned by the landowners, so you will be enriching the landowners, which gives them more political power. Since we are in the Ottomans market, what we can do is actually not build any of those base kind of like beginner industries, and instead focus on our industrial production and let them kind of try and bring down the price of wood, fabric, and food. This seems like a little bit risky. Another thing is we can not, since we are part of their market, we don't get to decide the tariffs. Once we have our own market, we can remove the tariffs on grain, hardwood, iron, softwood, and fabric, and try and import those, largely to make our economy more an industrial economy. I really don't know what the Tunisian economy looks like to start. We might only have like a couple, buildings / factories, and it might be like pretty rough going. But our plan, or my plan, is to lean really heavily into two industries at the start. And those two industries are tooling and as well as arms industries. The reason being for the arms industries is that Ottomans is likely to declare war very early on in the game, from what I could tell based on watching a lot of these. In the Egypt one we are watching right now, they are preparing for the Ottomans to attack Egypt. If Ottomans attacks Egypt, the price of arms and cannons will skyrocket, and we will be inside a market where it is skyrocketing, and so that will make our arms production very, very profitable, which will help empower interest groups that are not the landowners. I think for the first level, the petite bourgeoisie owns the means of production, and so we'll look to like upgrade that later. And then the second reason why we want to do tooling is because when we get the technology for sawmills and kind of the later level stuff for the base production, then we want to implement those immediately, which require tools. And sawmills are actually owned by capitalists, not landowners. And so this way we are kind of just we're looking to get means of production for like the base inputs. We're looking to get the techs where we skip the landowners getting power and then invest in them, and those techs generally require tools. So we want to kickstart a tooling industry. So that's kind of like the multifaceted short-term like intro. We want to focus on those two industries, and we can focus, I think, on two industries instead of building all the industries because we start out as part of the Ottomans market, and so we will not experience like enormous like iron shortages when we build one thing that consumes iron. This is my hope. We'll see. Another thing is when we eventually kind of cast off our overlords in the Ottomans, if it's possible with diplomatic plays to also seize Tripoli as a subject or seize all their land, this is something that I think would probably be an easy way to expand our power. This was kind of how things worked in EU4, where being the subject of a very large nation was sometimes a good thing because you could easily get people to support your independence, and then in the war seize a bunch of land from your overlord as well. This is kind of popular in the Netherlands. But this is kind of what I'm thinking in terms of industry. Once we are out of the Ottomans market, we'll probably protect our supply of, these cheap inputs in order to try and focus on importing them, which brings us to trade. I think that, diplomatically speaking, there's kind of three people we want to suck up to in the beginning, and they're not the Ottomans. I think we want to suck up to the French, the Austrians, and the Russians, and I have a few reasons for them. For the Austrians, it's mainly that they just border the Ottomans, and they're a great power, and so if they can beat up on the Ottomans, so much the better. I think that I don't know what their markets look like. I suspect that the Austrians also have a good supply of iron, which once we declare independence from the Ottomans, if we have tooling industries and weapon manufacturers, we will need to import a lot of iron, and we will probably want to get that started before we get independence from the Ottomans, just to make things more smooth. I think this might be able to be a good source of income, starting to import probably more stuff than we need for a couple of reasons from these countries. One, seems that you get a diplomatic bonus from trading with people, and maybe we'll be able to get trade agreements and sort of get alliances with one of these three nations. But two, we want to, sort of make it easier to transition when we are not building the base inputs ourselves once we have our own market. So that's kind of like what we're thinking with the Austrians. It seems that Russia produces really cheap wood, and I imagine Tunis does not have a lot of wood. So I think long term, we will want a trade agreement with the Russians to import wood. They are the closest on the map to Tunis, to my knowledge, has a lot of wood. Brazil would be another one that we could maybe consider. But I think we kind of want to start that early, both for the diplomatic points as well as also to have it in place, because it takes a little while to grow. And we can't protect the supply early on, which means have no import tariffs, because the Ottomans are in control of the market, but we can do it later. And the third is France. And so France, I think there's a lot of ways that the run can just go horribly, and I think they revolve mainly on France just annexing Tunis. I assume that they would rather protectorate Tunis, and so it might just be going from the Ottomans to going to France, which isn't too bad. But if France does not become our overlord, at least early on, I think that we will want to try and trade with France and make France our ally. And really, really, that's like the number one diplomatic priority. If it's possible to make France our ally, we want to do that. They might be domineering towards us. We'll probably try and keep relations high with all three of these countries, but mainly focus on France and Russia. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking diplomatically for the opening. In terms of technologies, early technologies, I think we want to just make a beeline. I don't know what the opening tech looks like for Tunis, but I think we want to make a beeline towards first universities, and then found the universities and try and increase our literacy, because we are trying to leap over all the input industries and focus on the industrial industries to start. We will really need a lot of qualifications, which I don't know exactly if we'll be able to pull this off, but I assume that getting a university and getting a high-level university kind of early on will be a good start. Although high level for such a small country might just be a university a level 2 in Tunis, renamed Carthage. And so I'm thinking that this is kind of the first deck, and then I have 3 or 4 ideas of what to focus on next. Another one is we want to be able to make colonies, so we have to get colonization and the anti-malaria texts. But I think this is for a little down the road, because I don't think we will be able to afford colonies early on. This is just my assumption. If things look different, then maybe that's something to look into. Also, we would have to, disempower certain interest groups in order to make that happen. We'll come back to interest groups in a little bit. And so that's one idea. Another idea is implementing canning relatively early, which is a which allows for a different production method in the grocer, which uses a lot more fish as its input than grain. And the reason I think that going for this early is good is because I think we want to get a lot of our food from fish, because my understanding is that landowners are not the owners of fisheries. I could be incorrect in this, and I'm pretty sure they're not the owner of fisheries once you invest clippers. So this combination, we're trying to like eliminate the landowners as much as possible from all of the production buildings we're building, and I think canning early on will be a good look. And to my knowledge, canning utilizes tools, fish, and grain. And so these are all things that we will be trying to get, and it utilizes less grain than other things. And so it's a way of trying to get your populations off of grain and onto fish, is my understanding of the tech. So canning is another one that we would want early. And the third is going to sound a little bit weird because we don't want to go to war a lot, I don't think, but that's rifling. And the reason why is this is a production method for the arms, or the, like, I forget the name of the industry, the one that produces small arms and cannons. And what this does is significantly, it is owned by capitalists. And so if we are trying to empower the industrial class, which we are, then making the industry we think is going to generate the most profit, our arms industries, making those use the means of production that empowers is owned by capitalists, enriching the capitalists, is something that we definitely want to do. And so that is kind of where I'm thinking for the techs kind of early on, and then we'll transition to something later. I don't want to make too many plans for later because I don't know how this opening is going to go. You know, we might just get rolled by France in the first, like, 2 hours or something, which I kind of think is a likely probability. I think Tunis is not very strong. But going for rifling early and trying to really drive up the price of arms, like, once we have our own market, if we get there, I think that small arms and cannons, we would just want to remove the export tariffs on, just to enrich the owners of the arms industries as much as possible, and try and depress any sort of prices that are, like, helping to make landowners profit. So that's rifling, the malaria tech, canning, and universities is kind of where I'm thinking the first 4 directions, and then focusing mainly on society and trying to get, like, the multicultural, like, sort of area. I think that also, I don't know the techs for tools, but also getting tools that the tooling industry that's owned by capitalists is, like, also going to be something we're interested in. If we, like, take Sardinia, we'd want to focus a lot on mining. I think that they should have a large iron, like, deposit there. And so, also, like, I don't think there's too much wood to chop, but if there is, like, getting access to sawmills and these types of things that are no longer owned by I keep forgetting the name. Not the landowners. Okay. So that's like the if we have to make, like, 4 types of, like, priorities for, like, our industry and our tech, like, early on, it's avoid empowering the landowners, increase standard of living. So as much as possible, we actually do want to focus on, like, the food and the wood and the fabric, which is unfortunate because those are all owned by the landowners early on. So there's a little bit of conflict of interest. We're hoping that the market kind of resolves it inside the Ottomans market, and then we could get better tech to figure it out later. And then we also want to increase literacy, hence beelining, the universities. And then we also want to focus on weapons manufacture and largely look to export weapons. I think in the long run, having a really strong weapons manufacturing base, though, seems to be a pretty good look, because it looks like whenever people go to war in this game, they hemorrhage a bunch of money when the price of weapons shoots up. If we can, like, have a peacetime supply of weapons, and then when wartime hits, just stop all of our exports of weapons and, like, kind of speed bump rather than, like, brick wall the price, I think maybe it makes it a lot cheaper to go to war. I'm not sure on this. Looking long term, I think that, well, I actually have, like, an idea of, like, what we'll build, like, kind of in the first, run of like stuff, which is like 1 to 2 construction centers, a weaver, a clothier. I'm not sure if the weaver is separate from the cotton manufacturer. If it is, then we would build it. If it's not, then we would try and avoid it because we don't want to empower landowners. A couple fisheries, a toolmaker, another weaver, arms manufacturer, paper maker, glass maker, grocer, toolmaker, and then several tool makers, then a shipwright, and then basically just several arms manufacturers is kind of what I'm thinking what the opening looks like. Talking about interest groups, I think we will want to empower the industrialists, the intelligentsia, and the armed forces overall, and that we will want to disempower the rural folk and the landowners, kind of as a general heuristic. Let's try and go back on this video a little bit, because he is kind of looking at what we're looking at right now, or what we're talking about. And as far as like texts go, now that we're like looking at this, or laws go, we can talk about laws a little bit, where I think we'll be. We would want to reform from a monarchy to a republic, because it was a republic back in the day, Carthage. Autocracy, we would maybe want to reform to oligarchy, except my understanding is that oligarchy is supported by the landowners, so maybe we can find something that's a little bit more consistent with the other things we want to do. We want was that racial segregation? We don't want any of that. We want freedom of religion. Let's see. I'm going to pull this bigger because I can't read it right now very easily. Let's see. We don't want hereditary bureaucrats. And I think we want to empower the military pretty high. Agrarianism would not be the way to go, I don't think, in Tunis, because we want the landowners to be weak. So like anything but agrarianism would be pretty good. I think eventually we want free trade. We want taxation that is like progressive. I think we want strong police. Definitely want schools and healthcare, all this type of stuff. And then looking at the right, we just generally want to be socially progressive. Tunis, actually, when I was looking up information for this run, Tunis was it was the first state in Africa to outlaw slavery, which I thought was interesting. And maybe there will be something in there in terms of, I don't know, I assume that there won't be very much in the ledger, which is like the missions that are specific to your country. I assume there will not be that much for Tunis, but maybe there will be, and that'll be interesting. If there's something for like abolishing slavery early, that would be cool, and definitely help with the migration idea. I think we actually want to stay in the Ottomans market for a good amount of time, and try and get benefits from both migration and our ability to industrialize without focusing on the base inputs. And then eventually, once the Ottomans get in a war, then we look to make a play and declare independence and or take Tripoli. This kind of, I think, what the plan is. And looking long term, I think that a big problem is going to be France. And I think that we want to be friends with France. And I think that this is kind of the linchpin of whether the run is easy or not. If France is friends with us, it's actually very hard to invade Tunis, because you either have to walk through Egypt or you have to walk through Algeria, in terms of land. And I think building up a really strong navy is the way to go. Navy gives you more power projection than an army. So we don't focus on the army very much. It allows you to declare interests in more areas, which will give you more options for trade and colonization. And then we really focus on the colonizing game, looking to kind of exploit. This is consistent with the roleplay themes, because Phoenicia was founded Carthage. Carthage was a colony that was sending stuff back to Phoenicia, and then Carthage founded colonies in southern Iberia and Sardinia, and they shipped resources back. And so this colonial exploitation, if you're looking at it historically, when has it happened before industrialization? It happened with Carthage. And so I think that this will be a nice little thing to play as. And if we can seize if we can make the Suez Canal, we'll be able to make very profitable, I assume, trade routes without too many convoys. And so building up our navy is, I think, generally what we want to do in order to like project power. It is more expensive to build up your navy because it sorry, the navy is always active, whereas like the military is not. Or sorry, the land military. Also, I think this will allow us to support. So I think we will want like a national army, and we will be able to have it very elite if we keep it very small. And this will be not too expensive for us to keep it very elite, I don't think, if we have such a large arms industry. Or it'll be easy for us to raise the troops when we have to, in the case of like our colonial ventures. So, but if France hates us, then we will have a problem because France has a border with us. I believe in Algeria, they have like the coastal Algeria, and I believe they border Tunisia. And so then we will have a bit of a problem if France decides that we should be in their sphere of influence, which I've seen in several playthroughs of this game. France declares war on Ottomans for Algeria. But being in France's sphere would not be the end of the world. We would still get to try and focus mostly on industrialization instead of, and they are having technical difficulties in the stream. So they would get to focus mostly on industrialization. And so, the long term, I think that that's kind of like I don't think I can get more specific than that. You know, other than mainly for research and tech, mainly focusing on the social tree and trying to build up Carthage tall, and then I guess social and industrial, and focusing less on military, because I think that we just generally want to avoid fights with anyone near our strength. There is one exception, however. I think that if Sardinia Piedmont or the two Sicilies get into a conflict where they've bitten off more than we could chew, or that they can chew, that us invading either Sicily or Sardinia is a really good look, especially if we have a stronger navy, because we should be able to interfere with troop movements, where if they send all of their troops to Sardinia to defend it, then we take their capital, or the same vice versa with Sicily. And if they keep all their troops on the mainland, we take the war goal and should get a nice ticking war score. This is kind of my thinking, and so I think that those two are going to be like easier to take as far as territory goes, like except for Tripoli is probably the easiest to take. And if we take a look at the map, they're right next to Tunis. They were Tunisian colonies. I think it's very themey. Looks like, is Italy formed, or is that two Sicilies? I can't tell. But I think that this is kind of, if we are looking to mix it up, this is maybe where we're looking for the opportunity, is whenever they get in a war. Also, I think that if we declare an interest in Italy, I think both... So here's the thing, is I'm concerned we can only declare one interest early on. And we want to have trade with all of Russia, Austria, and France, and so we were going to want to declare that one interest in an area where they all have an interest, and Italy might be the area, which will also give us a look into whenever there are wars, or like a good time for us to take Sardinia or Sicily. This is kind of my thinking on this, and so that militarily is like kind of going to be the goal. We talked about technology. The goal is to be like mainly socially and industrial focused, and really try and build up in the same way that the British Empire, you know, kind of has all these colonies that support this juggernaut. We would kind of want to try and replicate that. Although I assume Tunis just starts out ungodly weak, and maybe this run's just like impossible and cursed. But this is the plan for it. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to put them in the comments. I assume that, you know, we start out like agrarian, landowner, really heavy, and so breaking out of that will be difficult, but I'm hoping that the combination of just not building any landowner buildings and just pumping our government, or like building arms, and then the arms getting super rich, I'm hoping will highly empower you know, other interest groups so that we can try and push reforms. I don't think we want to try and make a revolution like happen early on. which would be like an option to try and push through reforms. Um, but at the same time, if we piss off the landowners, we piss off the landowners, and I don't think we care that much. You can make an argument for like trying to make a landowner-focused society, like in Carthage, but I don't think that, which might have been true of like old Carthage, but if you look at like what Carthage was doing, kind of just this all this trade and bringing resources back into its empire, it doesn't like fit with like the landowner paradigm, and so we kind of went to have a play style that was consistent with ancient Carthage's play style, which is we're going to just like extract resources and pull them back to our opulent city, which was very multicultural. They synthesized a lot of like mythology and like culture from like both Greece and northern Africa, and so that was like Hercules was big and popular, but then they had like Baal, which is like a deity that was not part of like the Hellenistic pantheon. And so yeah, I think I about covered a majority of my thoughts on this sort of like role play as Carthage type thing, and how I think we're going to be able to try and undermine our overlord. Another important thing to note is if we have like all the arms industries in the Ottoman market, when we leave there, this is another reason. I don't think I mentioned this, but this was the initial reason. If we have all of the arms industries in the Ottoman market, and it's not that profitable for them to create arms industries, I think the AI won't create them. So when we eventually split from their market, probably through violence and through war, not only will we have an arms industry that makes our armies like cheaper, although our armies are probably going to be small and insignificant compared to the Ottomans, we will also make their weapons really expensive because they will no longer have access to our market. We just slap an embargo on them instantly. And so this will make war very expensive for the Ottomans. And conversely, or another thought I had was, this is also why I think we want to try and export arms to France really early on. That way, if we get into a conflict with them, it is more expensive for them to continue the conflict in terms of their budget. Now, I imagine it's going to be like a drop in the water relative to France's economy, and they'll have their own arms industries, and so will the Ottomans, but I'm just saying, in terms of producing an effect, it makes it, I think if you have an overlord, this might be a reasonable strategy, trying to abuse your overlord's market to not have to build input goods, and then focus on industrial goods, specifically focusing on tools and or arms, in order to make it so that you are ready to go to the next like modes of production on stuff, to skip the landowner means of production, because you have enough tools, and you can overbuild on both tools and arms, and the market of your overlord will just absorb that overbuilding. Whereas if you were like playing Japan, which is isolated, and you overbuilt, well, anything really, you would encounter some problems very quickly, right? Because your industries would just be wildly unprofitable. You can't build over your own consumption, and we're not consuming tools at the start, and we're not consuming that many arms, and so we shouldn't be able to build that many industries. But if we're part of a market that consumes a larger like portion of those, we can go into those industries pretty heavily. I think it also makes it so that we can just focus on one tech. Like I mentioned, rifling makes it so that the capitalists own the arms industry. So we can just like say, okay, we want to get rifling, and we want to get the one for tools and canneries, and then we focus on society. And so it eases a sort of burden in terms of like what technologies we need in order to focus on certain things as well. And then if we look here, this is probably what our colonial options are going to look like early on. And I don't know, the Congo is probably pretty rich in metals. We want to get metals from somewhere. Anyways, that's something we're probably going to have to figure out in game and can't figure out by looking at too many of these dev things. But the strategy of like let the Ottomans produce the input materials, and we'll just do, um, industrial goods, which should slow down their industrialization as well. Although I think it'll help kind of early on with like some of the political problems they're having inside, because they just like solidify the landowners or something. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to play. Uh, if we fail, uh, and the run is like no good. By the way, I think I will be trying to stream this the day it drops, which is the 25th, but it's the 25th in Sweden, which I think means it's the 24th in the United States. I will be trying to stream this run on my channel, so feel free to like, comment, or more importantly, subscribe if you're interested in seeing that. But if I fail this run, I'll probably just switch to Japan and look to be a farmer all by myself and keep to myself after I get brutalized. Actually, I'll probably try it twice, and because I think France's attitude towards us is going to be the most important thing for whether or not this run is like playable. I know Tunis is considered like unplayable in Vicky 2, but I think if we just like kowtow to France early on, that's like a perfectly viable option, and we just sit at home making arms and tools, and later on clippers, and we're just say to ourselves, we're just gonna try and expand, wait for an opportunity for where France is really weak, and then try and get either like Great Britain, Prussia, or Austria to help us out, or even Russia, I guess. Um, Again, I think importing wood from Russia is probably something we're going to look to do, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of wood in Tunisia. I could be wrong. I think that our like in terms of our natural resources, will have be well set up for grain. Another thing we can do is promote the export of like fertilizer in order to make making grain less profitable once we get that tech. That's something I saw in the Tokyo run, or not the Tokyo run, the Japan run that was done by the devs, where they intentionally made fertilizer really expensive so that their production of grain would be really high, but the profits would be like low, because one of the inputs they had this production method where they were using fertilizer, which meant their output was really high, but since the fertilizer was so expensive, it made it so that it was not very profitable to the landowners. And so like stuff like this, I think, is what we're going to focus on, and I think, yeah, being inside a market is going to make that a lot easier. Anyways, I think I'm rambling now. If anyone has any suggestions, for how they think a Tunis run can do better, please leave them in the comments, because I've been, just about for every Paradox game, I try and do like a Carthage run. Is very easier in Imperator, or Imperator, or however you pronounce it. It's pretty easy in Europa, and it's very easy in Crusader Kings, but it's a lot harder in Hearts of Iron. And it looks like it's going to be pretty hard in Vitoria as well. So if you have suggestions on what to do, feel free to put them in the comments. Like, even if they're like aggressive things like tax grain and start a revolution, like that might be the way to go. I'm not sure. Yeah, because like when you have an overlord, you don't have to worry as much about being annexed yourself, I think. And so maybe revolutions are easier or more profitable to do when you have an overlord. I'd be willing to accept that as a thesis. That seems reasonable. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm stuff. Maybe take a walk or something. Very pumped for Vicky 3, and I guess I'll see you around.